Greetings, everyone. I'm Martha Zavala, President of the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area. Welcome to Thursday with the League, Decarbonize Your Building, Decarbonize Your Life. Let's start the program today by paying tribute to our veterans who have served in our armed forces. Veterans Day is observed on November 11th, and this year we are especially grateful for those who have returned home from combat and for the sacrifices that they have made on our behalf. Today is also Common Sense Day, very appropriate holiday since our program is about common sense actions that cities and individuals can take to combat climate change. The more knowledgeable we become, the more effective measures we can take to make a difference. And now, before we hear from our guest speaker, Ben Stapleton of the U.S. Green Building Council, LA, I want to provide a brief overview of today's program. We will spend about half of our time hearing from our speaker, after which time we will answer your questions. Please enter your questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Enter your questions as you think of them. Don't wait until the end, please. Our moderator will present the questions for a response. We have people working on the back end, sorting through your questions and feeding them to our moderator so that they can get an answer for you as quickly as possible. Be aware that the questions may be edited for brevity and to avoid any duplicates. And we may not get to the time to answer all of the questions, but you can send them separately by email to our events committee at events@lwv-pa.org. That hyphen is very important. Without the hyphen, you end up in Pennsylvania, which is a very nice place, but you want your question to come to us. So that's events@lwv-pa.org. And we'll try to send you an answer within the next few days if it's possible, or maybe we'll just have another event that you could come to and we can have a special topic on any other area of interest. So please do not enter your question or any comments into the chat box, as that feature is used by the webinar staff to keep things running smoothly. If you have concerns about sound or anything else, you can still type them into the Q&A and someone will try to help you out. And after the Q&A and before we close the workshop, we'll announce opportunities to take matters into your own hands. So please stay tuned. We're pleased to announce that Pasadena Media is again recording our presentation, and we'll be posting the video on our YouTube channel for later viewing and sharing. We really want you to share these links because it's important that many people get this information. So today, we're very excited to sponsor this relevant, urgent topic on common sense climate action. Common sense doesn't equate to easy. It means there's a practical approach to solve a problem. Our guest speaker will talk about solutions and not just about the bad situation we're in. So here to welcome Mr. Stapleton, who will talk about combating climate change, is our moderator, Bill Kelly of the LWV PA Natural Resources Committee. Bill, please introduce yourself and our speaker.
Well, good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm Bill Kelly. I'm with the League's Natural Resources Committee, which focuses on education and advocacy on environmental issues. And today we have a program that's about decarbonizing buildings. The topic specifically, decarbonize your building, decarbonize your life. This is highly important because in California, the goal is to cut emissions of climate change gases, greenhouse gases, by 80% by the middle of this century, which is coming right up. And buildings emit about 27% of these emissions. So you really can't meet that goal without cutting carbon emissions attributable to buildings. Those emissions occur because buildings use electricity from the grid. which has not yet been fully decarbonized. They use refrigerants, which when emitted and leak out of air conditioning and refrigeration systems and so forth, are warming gases. And finally, because natural gas is used for water and space heating in our buildings. So to find out how to do this and what can be done, please welcome Ben Stapleton, a Los Angeles native who's executive director of the U.S. Green Building Council, Los Angeles. His current work is based on coordinating an ecosystem, leveraging the built environment as the entry point and connective fabric to help create a more sustainable society. Ben launched and managed the LaCretz Innovation Campus in downtown LA, which is a green building that is home to many programs and events involving cutting edge businesses and nonprofits in the sustainability arena here in Los Angeles. He's been a real estate advisor and energy efficiency consultant, among other things in his career. And he's the recipient of the distinctive Da Vinci Award for Innovation, the Los Angeles Business Council's Community Impact Award, Stratoscope's Impact Maker to Watch Award, and CoStar's Power Broker designation in the Los Angeles market. He served as managing director for a program, the LA Better Buildings Challenge run by the DOE. And that program dealt with 600 million square feet of commercial buildings, helping them become more sustainable. So Ben, we're happy to hear from you. Take it away.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to present. I'm trying to start my video, but I think the host stopped it. So if you could unstop my video, perfect. Thank you very much. I'm also a Pasadena resident, so I'm excited to be here with this group. This means a lot to me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go ahead and start my presentation. Just to confirm, can you all see my presentation right now? I'm going to assume you can then.
Yes.
Perfect. So just a little bit of background. So my name's Ben Stapleton. I'm the executive director for the U.S. Green Building Council, Los Angeles. We're an independent nonprofit, so we're affiliated with the Green Building Council that runs the LEED credential and certification that you may know of. Our mission is different. We're really focused on leveraging the built environment as an entry point to create a more sustainable region for all here in Southern California. We cover LA County, San Bernardino County, Riverside County, Ventura County, and expanded into Orange County over this past year. And we're really a collection of people. We're a community unto ourselves that are really looking to make an impact in this space and are working together to really drive change. I've been here as executive director for about 2.5 years now and have really grown the organization, worked to diversify our member base and restructure our programs. And so we're really doing a lot of impactful work right now. And I'm excited to be able to share with you some of that today. So to start, this is an important week, I think, to be talking about this, given this climate summit that's happening in Scotland right now. And, just want to share, it's hard, I think, when we think about climate change, when we talk about climate change, it's a real struggle. We try to have optimism, but if you look at the data, it's pretty clear at this point, that it's going to be tough for us to avoid impacts from climate change. We would have to dramatically decrease emissions in the next decade for us to stay kind of where we're at now in this baseline. And the reality is we're probably going to end up more at like a mid-level emissions scenario, which is going to cause changes in the environment. And I say that to be a realist. I'm also an optimist, and I think we can create positive impacts to fight this. This is a real thing we're dealing with. And I think we're seeing that more and more, whether that's increased risk of fires or water scarcity. We've all experienced this in the last couple of years now. And, I think it's tough sometimes because we get so caught up in numbers and data, it doesn't seem to really mean much to us. And I want to kind of bring this back to everything we've been experiencing for the last 2 years around this pandemic, where many of us have probably been checking data on the number of COVID cases on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And at some point you just sort of get immune, it starts to not mean so much. And I think it's easy to sort of get lost in the data and feel like we don't really have a role as individuals in that anymore. And I really kind of want to speak to the human part of that. Where do we really go from here when we're hit with these numbers on something as big as climate change? It's very hard as an individual to say, well, what does that mean to me? How can I really make an impact on that? And I want to just take us back to the fact that, we're all people, and this struggle for progress is really something that every generation has dealt with throughout the history of mankind, whether that's progress economically for your family, whether that's a progress to have more rights. And this is just part of our struggle in our generation, is the struggle around climate. And we have to really celebrate the small moments of triumph. We have to find the joy when we're dealing with something as big as climate change and changing climate in our world. We have to celebrate these small victories and just celebrate the humanity of it. And that can happen right here on a local level in the San Gabriel Valley and in Pasadena. And, really have to create relationships along the way and get happiness out of that journey. And I think that's important, because I think it's easy right now for a lot of people to feel overwhelmed and depressed with a lot of the challenges we're dealing with. And the reality is that struggle is just part of being human. And that doesn't mean that there's not hope and that we need to stop. We have some great opportunities in front of us, especially in this critical decade of the fight against climate change. And that's to accelerate the adoption of new technology that can help lead the way. We really need to expand our definition of how we define the workforce of the future. You can see this now, but sustainability is sort of becoming part of everything. And that means that everyone can benefit in their job in some way, shape, or form. And for me, what I've never really understood when people fight this push for sustainability is that we're really just trying to create a better environment. We just want to have a healthier place for our families, for our friends, and that should be something that everyone's excited about and everyone can share in that. If we create healthier environments, that's all going to mean that there's less cost for us in our lives, and we can, it's better for everyone. And we need to think long-term about adaptation and resilience. As I mentioned, we are going to feel the impacts of climate change. We are already. How do we adapt? How do we find the resilience that we need to get through this? The reality is the world's going to be fine. The world's been around for millions of years. It's the people that we need to worry about. It's figuring out how are we going to find our place to find balance in the world. And I really want to encourage encourage industry to use the green building community as a resource. Our members and volunteers are architects, engineers, contractors, they're planners, they're folks at city agencies, municipalities, and others that care about sustainability. They're consultants, they're everyone who sort of touches the space, developers, building owners, managers, financiers. And what I love about the work we do is that everything comes home in a building. If you're dealing with issues about energy, water, waste, mobility, it's all about buildings on some level. If it's mobility, it's people moving between buildings. Even infrastructure is built environment. That includes roads and ports and bridges. So even parks, that's all the built environment in some way, shape, or form. And I feel like sometimes we struggle on where can we make an impact. And that's part of why I choose to work in this space, is because through working directly in the built environment, we can actually impact everything around us. And when I say leverage us for that change, we've got a large community here in California, almost 80 million square feet of LEED certified buildings, almost 30,000 professionals. There's consistent growth in this. And we're certification agnostic here at USGBCLA. People are usually surprised to hear me say that. Frankly, I don't care if anyone's getting a LEED certification or a WELL certification or no certification at all, as long as they're doing the right things and creating a more sustainable environment. And so we're actually the local partner for the International Well Building Institute. We're the local partner for the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, which runs the Envision certification. We're the local partner for the Living Building Challenge. So we're really trying to bring our community together here in Southern California. And as part of that, we have committees that work on a variety of topics, ranging from advocacy to green schools. Our Women in Green group is celebrating a decade together next week. We have an urban landscape committee that we launched this past year, really looking at how to improve our landscapes locally. Our organization is open to anyone. These committees are open to anyone. If you're interested in any of these, I would encourage you to come out and get engaged. But these are groups who are working together to really create impact on these topics on a local level. And I want to encourage you, LA is really one of the leading cities in the nation around being green. We've made a lot of strides here in terms of our commitments to what we want to do. And if you look at greenhouse gas emissions by sector in the lower left-hand screen, you can see that buildings account for a huge amount of our emissions here locally. Obviously, we're dealing with issues around industry. People oftentimes don't think about it, but LA is the largest manufacturing base in the country. We're the largest logistics hub in the country. So we have a lot of emissions from an industry locally. And obviously there's other contributions like transportation is a big impact here. But again, this all comes home in a building somewhere. If you're manufacturing something that's in a building, transportation is between buildings. But we've made a lot of great commitments here in LA, and now the opportunity is to really make those happen and drive those forward. And when that comes to our commitments to energy, LA is committed to 100% clean energy by 2045. And I think it's really important to think about the context of our buildings as the grid becomes cleaner, as our utilities and our municipalities achieve these goals, we have to focus on sort of the other parts that create emissions on a building level, because as the grid becomes clean, it's to our benefit to lean more into electrification and to put more on the grid to a certain extent. That's going to help us as the grid becomes cleaner. Obviously, we need them to really fulfill that, but that's important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the mix of other, of combustion and kind of how that plays into things here in a moment. And there's a lot that goes into this. Rooftop solar is important as part of this mix. Other renewable energy sources like wind. We're going to see massive continued development in energy storage, and we're going to see smart deployment in terms of distribution, how we're shifting energy load around the grid as well. And I think it's important to take a step back and think about, well, what does this mean in terms of how do we actually use our buildings and our land here in LA? And if you look at this land use breakdown throughout the region here, and this is for LA County, almost 70% of our land use is residential in LA County, followed by commercial and industrial at equal percentages. And then if you break down even, that commercial, you can see, well, we got a lot of office buildings. We also have a lot of retail. It's important to kind of understand what we're dealing with here. And clearly residential is the largest portion of land use on a local level. One of the things I would encourage you to check out is we have a tool called the EcoMap LA, which is available from our website. I'll drop a link here in the chat later when we get to Q&A. We actually have built this out. It's an open free resource. People can submit projects to this, where you can actually check out buildings that are green throughout the greater LA region. A lot of them have images and video. We have tours built into this platform. I'd highly encourage you to check it out if you're looking to learn more about green buildings here in our city. As I said, you can look at those tours. They're self-guided tours. Excuse me, getting over my first cold in 2.5 years. You can drive to go check out those buildings. So I highly encourage you to check this out. We're going to be continuing to add functionality to this in the months and years to come. So coming back to buildings for a moment, why do buildings matter? Why should we care so much? So this is a breakdown of California end-use emissions. I think Bill said this earlier, but buildings account for 26% directly of emissions. Industry, you could argue a lot of that in industry emissions actually happens in buildings that may increase that number. And transportation, also feeds into that clearly on a large level with the amount of movement we have here. But buildings are a huge component of this, and that's really the opportunity for us to make an impact. And if you look at our buildings themselves and look at, well, what can we do on a home level? How can I look at decarbonizing my building? What does that mean? That means reducing the amount of carbon that's being generated by my home. There's really kind of 4 main end uses we look at, and that's water heating, space heating, cooking, and clothes drying. And those things all right now use natural gas. Natural gas is a combustion-based technology that is generating emissions. Yes, that's less than coal. Yes, that's probably less than other sources, but we really need to start to look at moving the natural gas out of our system, because the grid is becoming cleaner. Because we have these commitments for our grid to get to 100% renewable energy, we need to move off of these less clean sources onto the grid to take advantage of these renewable sources. And so one of the things I want to show you here in this graph, if you look on below, on the left-hand side, you can see our sort of baseline right now with energy and emissions that are generated in LA from multifamily. So that's apartment buildings. Now, if we start to move that to sort of a medium efficiency all electric situation, so that's looking at putting in heat pumps for our water heating, for our space cooling, induction cooktops for cooking, heat pump dryers, we can get to that place where we're reducing that energy use by 40% and emissions by 85%. If we go high efficiency and go all electric, we can reduce that even further by 61% and 90% of our emissions. That's why this is important, because moving these energy sources to the grid allows us to take dramatic reductions of carbon emissions out of our home environments. And just using water heating as an example, if you look at single family, multifamily water heating stock here in California, combustion heating in California is over 90% of our water heating. This is actually a kind of a unique California thing. I didn't learn this myself until probably the last year or so, but many other parts of the country, they already use electric water heating. But here in California, we tend to use gas because we have the gas infrastructure that's been in place. And the technology's been proven on a lot of the electric heating, we just don't have it. So we need to start making that shift here in a more direct way. And this is sort of a very California issue that we're dealing with right now. And this next decade is very critical for us in terms of adoption. If we want to hit these goals to meet some of the climate targets that we've hit for California, you can see here, we need to essentially dramatically decrease the amount of natural gas space and water heating that we're doing in the next decade. You can see here, by 2030, we need to sort of be at almost 70% of our sales of equipment needs to be high efficiency electric space and water heat pumps. That's a big change from where we are now. Right now, we're at what, just above 10% maybe. So that's a big jump, but we need to do that if we're actually going to hit the goals we've set for ourselves. That's pretty much the only way to do it in our homes right now. So I think it's a really important thing to note. And the reality is that the market isn't quite there yet. We do have contractors that are getting trained to install these things. You're seeing it more and more. There's a lot of aggressive rebates right now that are rolling out for heat pumps, but we're going to probably see a lot of increased investment in this space in the next couple of years to really drive adoption. And a lot of times people ask the question, well, is technology ready? Is this stuff ready to go? So the technology is there for single family, for multifamily. You can see here, if you start to look at small commercial and large commercial buildings, there's some places where we need to kind of look at getting better technology in place. But the technology is there. There's a picture on the top on the right of a heat pump water heater. And then space heating also, the technology is here. It is available now. You can see we have different kinds of systems available for single family, for multifamily. And then as you get into commercial, a lot of the technology has been proven out. So that technology is here today. And then when you look at cooking, we do have induction cooktops. We're starting to see those more and more. I live in a 110-year-old home here in Pasadena, and I have a gas-fired range that does not have a functioning exhaustion hood because it's an older home. Buying an induction cooktop has been on my list of things to do here. I just moved in here about a year and change ago because I'm the one who does all the cooking. So I'm breathing in all those fumes, and it's near my children's rooms. And there's no question that that's creating, emissions and pollutants in our local environment, and that's impacting us. And so that technology is here. We're also starting to see more heat pump dryers, combo washer dryers. There's, I think something like the statistic is, I think 85% of the energy used in drying is from gas, and that's essentially pulling water, out of our clothes in the dryers. And so one of the things I wanted to mention is we have a net zero accelerator that we started a few years ago when I first arrived here. We really help pilot and promote new technology that can help us get to net zero in our homes and in our commercial buildings. A lot of the technology exists today. The built environment remains one of the hardest places to get new technology to market. That's why we created this program. And there also wasn't really an innovation community around real estate and buildings here. In fact, there's only one other one really in the country, and that's in New York, because they have a very centralized ownership market. And so we created this program 3 years ago. We've had over 56 startups that have come through our program here at USGBCLA, and we're tracking over 50 pilots. It's really been a great program. I would encourage you to learn more if you're interested. And a lot of this technology is for homes and businesses. There's ways you can pilot things out in your home as well. And then taking a step back for a moment and kind of looking at the regulatory environment, a lot of the regulations, the improvements to code are really pushing us in this direction, right now. So, we already have requirements to reduce building energy use per square foot in all building types that are pretty aggressive. We're looking at over 50%, about 50% by 2050. I suspect those will be pulled in even more as we get closer. On new buildings, will be net zero carbon by 2030. 100% of buildings will be net zero carbon by 2050. I expect those numbers to be pulled down. I think net zero carbon will probably be pulled down to 2045. A lot of stuff just has to happen sooner if we're going to get there. And already now, code here in the state of California is requiring new homes and buildings to have, essentially be solar ready. That includes multifamily and to have solar panels. I think we're going to see an increased push for them to not only have higher numbers of EV charging units and be EV charging ready, but our most recent code has increased the language around having those buildings be all electric ready and increase the incentives to be fully electric. So, we're seeing this stuff happening. Code is going to continue to push us there. I think the message for a lot of us who own our own homes or own buildings is, the opportunities to try to get ahead of that. Take advantage of rebates that are there now as they're trying to push adoption, because this stuff is going to happen anyway at some point in the next 10 to 20 years. It's good to get ahead of it if you can, and to take advantage of rebates when they come out to help early adopters. And there's some interesting trends to look at right now around buildings. So sensors and the Internet of Things. I'm a big advocate for indoor air quality sensors, which we've seen drop pretty dramatically in price and become way more accurate over the last 3 to 5 years. In fact, I just working on a project right now. We're purchasing indoor air quality sensors for low-income multifamily units, because there's no data in these units. And we typically see that indoor air quality is 3 to 5 times worse than outdoor air quality. And if you think about buildings, and typically in our lower income or disadvantaged communities, they're less well maintained, they're built with cheaper materials. And so the likelihood that air quality, which is already worse outside, because these tend to be communities that have more industry and are closer to freeways, is going to be 3 to 5 times worse, because we're dealing with buildings that probably aren't well maintained. And so that's something that we've really had an increased focus on. I think we've all experienced that through the pandemic as well, just being more aware of our environments and what's impacting our health in our environments. And so last year we launched a program called the Healthy Building Alliance, which I'll talk about more in a moment. The WELL certification for buildings is seeing 1 million square feet of new projects daily, as people are concerned about getting back into their office spaces and others and want to make sure those are healthy. I became a WELL certified professional this last year myself as well. Materials transparency is also a really important trend right now to be aware of. We're seeing a dramatic increase in what are called environmental product declarations, or EPDs, around materials. They're being required more and more now in development. More and more manufacturers are being forced to get them in place. And an EPD is essentially sort of like an ingredients list for a material. What goes into it, how it was manufactured, what's the embodied carbon, what's the carbon that went into manufacturing that product. And we're seeing more labels around the chemicals and materials that are in those because we need to. Frankly, there has not been transparency on materials that go into our homes for many, many years. We need to see that because it's impacting our health. There's clear data that having increased ventilation and natural light, having better environments leads to higher levels of productivity and longer term health, especially mental health. And so we need to be focusing on these issues. And another thing that we're really seeing as a trend is that demand response continues to evolve. Demand response is essentially being able to shift energy when needed throughout the day. This is incredibly important. As we get more solar onto the grid, we're producing more and more energy during the day. We need to store that energy for use at night. As we get more EVs onto the grid, well, people tend to charge at night, and we won't have that solar load there. So there's a lot of sort of energy shifting that needs to be done right now on our grid, especially as we electrify. And this is a big challenge. We don't have the infrastructure in place in a lot of the ways we need to really drive this forward. And so I think we're going to see a significant amount of investment in infrastructure in the years to come. And by the way, I'm not sure what happened here. There we go. By the way, if you have questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat. I know we'll get those at the end of the session. I also want to mention our Healthy Building Alliance. So we launched this program last year. This is not a certification. This is a commitment that anyone can make. We actually have a home office version of this program, and so you can certify your home office. But it's really a commitment that anyone makes to 5 simple principles. So improving indoor air quality, using green cleaning products, having access to nature, promoting movement within your environment, and doing water quality testing. We chose these 5 principles because we felt this is really an equity issue. Most of the healthy building certifications that are out there cost a lot of money and are very time intensive. The reality is most people won't be able to do them. I would venture to say probably 95% of the buildings that are out there. So we created this program to make it equitable access for everyone. Again, it's not a certification, it's a commitment. People make the commitment, we help onboard people, we provide discounted resources, we provide access to information to help you create a healthier environment for yourself and for those around you. So I really encourage you to check this out. I've been astonished myself about the data around, how improving air quality can improve your long-term health, how spending that time in nature every day and just being active really can dramatically increase productivity and mental health. And these are things we need to focus on, especially in this time. Along those lines, I've become a big advocate for native plants. We launched a California Native Plant Landscaper Certificate Program last year with our partners at the Theodore Payne Foundation. We've now got a pretty extensive wait list for this program. We're offering in English and Spanish. It's really targeting our gardeners and small contractors gardening community, trying to give them the information they need to use native plants the right way to be able to bid jobs when they're doing gardening, to talk about what plants to use, what those maintenance costs are going to be, the fact that a lot of people, when they get native gardens in place, it doesn't grow that much the first year. They want to have that big lush garden. Well, native plants they kind of pop in that second or third year. You got to wait a little bit longer, things like that. So I've actually been certified through this program myself. I'm a big advocate in this. There's no question that using native plants reduces irrigation needs, reduces your long-term maintenance costs. It reduces our wildfire risk, especially when they're used intelligently, and increases our local biodiversity, which is a big issue for us as well. We need to create more natural environments here locally for our insects, for our wildlife, and having these native plants really helps support that on a local level. If you're interested in contacting a landscaper who can help do that for you, again, we have a whole program and a database of the folks who've gone through this course with us here at USGBCLA. One of the issues that we've been actively working on is looking to reduce wildfire risk in our local communities. I'm a native, I grew up here. I've seen the impacts. I've seen the differences in our chaparral, and I'm a hiker. I'm out there all the time. There's no question everything's drier, more susceptible to fire. We've seen this as a major issue because no business community has really adopted wildfire as their cause. So we've been on a mission to really create cultural change within the green building community to tell the wildfire prevention community that, hey, you should be using us. We are out there pitching sustainability. We should be pitching sustainability with wildfire prevention being part of that. So we're trying to create that change. We just launched this toolkit about 2 weeks ago that compiles a bunch of resources that are out there in a really digestible way around home hardening, defensible space, fire resistant landscape. There's a QR code in the lower left-hand screen. If you know how to use those, you can just use your phone to take a picture of it. It'll send you a link to take you directly to download that toolkit. But we've gotten great feedback on this. And I myself, having been through this, I know that I have a long list of things I need to do at my home, but it's important to start because we only know that wildfire risk will continue to increase here in the years to come. Along those lines, we've been on a mission to launch a certification for our contractors and landscapers, similar to our native landscape one, but around wildfire reduction. So right now, there's actually no certification for this. And frequently when contractors are bidding jobs to do work at your home, whether it's retrofit work or remodel, or if you're looking at a landscaper to come in, they should be bidding those jobs saying, hey, I know how to do this in a way that's going to reduce your fire risk. I think people will be more likely to hire them. I've been in conversations on a high level with the state where they're trying to put in, more boxes to check around permitting, more boxes to check when you're going and trying to get, the ability to add to your home. And that's fine. We need to have that around reducing fire risk, but we also need to leverage the private sector. So we've been really trying to find funding to stand this up. I think I applied for 5 grants in the last year to help fund this program. We're not quite there yet, but I'm hoping we'll get there in the next 6 months to a year. And then I also want to provide some context around some of the green business trends that are also driving some of this. Right now we're seeing a real inflection point around sustainability in our major corporations. I think you're probably seeing this as well if you follow the news. Everyone's making a commitment to go net zero by 2030 or 2040. And, frankly, a lot of them don't know what that means yet. And we've seen a lot of greenwashing. I would caution you, a lot of the funds that are out there right now that are labeled as green funds really aren't. And people are really just using this as a way to help drive sales. So I encourage you to dig into that kind of stuff. I want to highlight some of the trends that we're seeing here in 2021. Industrial decarbonization is one that I'd flag as a big issue here in LA. Our manufacturing industrial sectors have been left far behind. In fact, we're working on a white paper right now on sustainability in manufacturing. We're seeing an increased push around mobility and sustainable mobility as a perk when people are hiring. Aviation is now seeing a push for electrification and for a change in the kind of fuel they use. Circular economy is really becoming more of a thing in terms of what we're doing with our waste. So we're seeing some big trends here around corporate commitments. And that's true on a local level as well. I wanted to highlight some of these companies here. So the Walt Disney Company, made a commitment to go 100% zero carbon by 2030. Mattel has committed to go 100% recyclable or bio-based plastic by 2030. Live Nation's also made similar commitments. Wells Fargo, net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. I would argue that's much too far out. They need to pull that up by probably about 15 to 20 years. And they've committed to $500 billion to sustainable finance, which is great. Google has been a big leader. One of the things they announced, I don't know if we have it on here, but they're actually trying to go, they're working around to offset all their water use since the creation of the company, which I think is amazing, and are really looking to, all of their cloud computing and everything like that. They're already carbon neutral on that. They're looking to go even further and be carbon negative. So that's kind of work we need to see done if we're going to get back to that major graph, if we're going to shift where we're headed right now on climate change. And you're seeing a lot of these companies on the right-hand side. There's a climate pledge for companies to go by net zero by 2040. Again, I would encourage you. A lot of people are making these pledges. We run a group that works with corporate sustainability folks. A lot of them are still trying to figure out how they're going to do it, and they don't know. The pledge is important. That's the first step in the journey, but we need to figure out how they get there. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight, and I know I'm probably data dumping a bunch of information on you, but just as a reminder, Senate Bill 100 or SB 100 is requiring that California gets to 100% clean energy by 2045. LADBP here locally is looking to supply 100% of their energy by 2045, but 80% by 2036. I actually think they're going to get there ahead of schedule. The LADBP's made some good progress and is pulling that up. And I think it's important to be aware of some of the paths here. So you can see a lot of people, we have these 2020 targets, these 2030 targets. You can see where we've kind of performed to date. So we have a lot of work to do when we make these commitments. They're not going to be very easy things to do. And I think the reality is we're going to see a lot of investment over the next decade. I think you're starting to see that on the federal level now with a lot of what's being proposed there by the Biden administration. California is going to be a huge recipient of those funds. We need to be ready to receive those funds and know what we're going to do with them when they come. A lot of that's going to go to preparing our grid and our infrastructure here locally. And electric vehicles will be a big push of that. If you're looking at how to decarbonize your life, decarbonize your home, it is looking at where you're using natural gas in your home. It's looking at putting solar on your roof and then getting an EV. An EV is one of the biggest buckets of how we personally create greenhouse gas emissions. So I've got solar on my roof here in Pasadena. I enjoy doing that. I haven't bought an EV yet, which is my deep, dark secret because I've had to drive much in the last 2 years and I've had no car payments. I'm getting just back to that place where I'm getting an EV here shortly and taking on that car payment. But there's no question this is the future. I think you're seeing that every major auto manufacturer is committing to all electric vehicles by certain dates. We're going to be phasing out new gasoline cars here in California by 2035. And we have to see massive investment in EV charging over the next 5 to 10 years. We just don't have enough chargers. So you're going to start to see a lot of that be rolled out. And we do have some pretty aggressive rebates around charging here locally. Want to encourage you to check out our talent portal if you appreciated some of the information that you've seen today. We launched this as a centralized hub. We have featured employers, we have job postings, but we have actually all of our recorded content available for free on our talent portal. We have upcoming training. We have a mentor network if you're looking to get involved and mentor. We're always looking for more mentors. So I'd encourage you to check out our talent portal on our website. And along those lines, we have some upcoming events here. In fact, this just happened yesterday. We had a sustainability tour of SoFi Stadium. Our Women in Green group is celebrating a decade together next week. We have training coming up around, recycling and true zero waste. Our G-Pro Fundamental Certificate is a great certificate. If you're looking to learn more, it's only a 4-hour class. It's very accessible. We've trained over 800 people with this program in the last few years. I think it's just a great base for anyone to learn about sustainability fundamentals. I encourage you to check that out. We also offer lead AP training as well. One of the things I wanted to mention is connected to this, we're really looking at building a talent pipeline for this region. Last year, we launched our Green Schools program, where we're offering sustainability fundamentals training for free for kids, elementary, middle, and high school. We actually train up volunteers to do these presentations. So if you're interested in doing this, this could be you doing one of these presentations. We're on track to have about 1,200 kids go through these workshops with us this year. We just won a grant to add hands-on projects to these classes. I'm really, really excited about. But we also explain about what kind of careers kids can have in the future. We ask the people who present, talk about their own career pathway. This is also an equity issue. The reality is that in many of our low-income or disadvantaged communities, they just don't talk about climate change. There's just not this talk about sustainability, where we tend to have that more in our affluent communities. Everyone needs to be part of this conversation. We're increasingly seeing a bifurcated society where those who have the resources to adapt and be more resilient in the face of climate change will, and those that don't will not. So it's really important we get this education out to our youth today. And again, this is something you can get involved in. You can see here, there's a link to our website. And if you have a school that you're involved with, anyone can sign up for free on our website to schedule a workshop for their class. So I just want to make sure I socialize that with you all. And then also as part of our talent pipeline, you notice we're starting with youth. We created this program last year called the Green Building Corps. So we basically are bringing on about 40 unemployed or underemployed professionals every year. They volunteer through our program. We also try to get them placed in paid internships. We are selling bundles of hours of support to firms and to cities and other community projects here in the region. We do 100% mentor-mentee matchmaking in this program, and we're really pushing for diversity and getting people into jobs. We launched this program last year. It's been great. I think we've had about 50% job placement rate, and it's really just been a fantastic experience for us to work with these folks. And this is early career and mid-career folks. So it's not just young people. It's people who are also looking to get into the space as they get older. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention our gala coming up on December 8th. This is the holiday party we've been waiting for 2 years here at USGBCLA. It's going to be Union Station in downtown. It's going to be safe. We're going to require vaccination for folks who attend. But Union Station is a really, really big space. It's going to be a Roaring 20s theme, a night less prohibited. I think we're all looking to get together and have a fun party. If you're interested in getting more engaged with us, I would encourage you to come out. And then also, if you appreciate the work we're doing, we have a small nonprofit team. Donations always mean a lot to us. You can donate by texting GREEN to 707070. There's also other ways to get involved. We're very community and people focused. I would encourage you to reach out to me, and I'm sure I'll be putting my contact information in the chat. But I think everyone has a place in really helping in this journey around sustainability. And with that, I think I'm roughly on time. I think so. I encourage you to reach out to me. I know we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A right now. I'm happy to get into that. But you can see my contact information here on the screen. So thank you for the time. And Bill, I guess I'll turn it over to you for some Q&A.
Well, thank you, Ben. A very informative presentation. And we do have a number of questions that have streamed in here, probably more than we may have time to answer. But I'll try to synthesize some of them. One of the questions that's been asked is, given Sandy Roth's article in the LA Times yesterday about net metering and future state policy on that, is, what role that plays in terms of decarbonizing buildings. And it leads to kind of a broader question of, you have the existing buildings that are out there and the new buildings. And it seems with standards, it's fairly easy to get a low carbon or no carbon building when you're building fresh. But most of the buildings out there exist already. And it sort of leads to what's needed in terms of public policy and finance to retrofit buildings, to get rid of the carbon emissions out there. And certainly net metering, has been a key thing that stimulated solar along with the incentives. So what do you see in terms of finance programs and public incentives that can address the existing buildings?
I think it's a great question. I would agree with you. I actually get really frustrated myself when people talk about new buildings all the time. And I go to a lot of these events where, we have architects and engineers talking about, we designed this amazing building that's, net zero and does X and Y. And, I sit there sometimes, I'm like, that's great, but that's one new building. And the reality is 98% of our buildings are already here. What do we do around that? So there's no question that we need to see more investment in retrofitting and weatherization work. I think we will see some of that on the federal level. We are seeing increasing incentives for things like heat pumps that I mentioned earlier and EV charging. We really need to see those done in an intelligent way. I think we've all experienced that applying for a rebate can be a bit of a challenge to understand what's going to be applicable, how that's going to work. We need to see better information and awareness and an easier market around financing for that kind of retrofit work at homes. And so I think there needs to be a lot of training for our contractor community and others to make things more accessible for people. Because a lot of us, we're just not going to know how to figure out how to do that on our own. It's very challenging. I didn't read Sammy Roth's article yet, so I can't comment on the article itself from yesterday. I do think net metering is important because I think it just increases the incentive to sort of do what you can on your own property. I live in Pasadena. I installed an oversized solar system because I knew I was going to be getting an EV here in the near term. The net metering's benefited me. I've the money that I've been offset on the net metering because my solar system is overproduced has covered my water bill for months now. And I think that's a really beneficial thing. That makes me more excited about solar. I'm willing to tell that story. And the challenge with net metering and all these things is that we need a smarter grid. It's incredibly complex when you start looking at how we need to shift energy from different homes or businesses and leverage energy storage. And so that just requires, a modernization. That's all going to take investment. But, I would also have us look at what we're spending right now on, fighting wildfire, what we're spending right now on the health impacts of asthma and other things that are related to, related to natural gas burning, related to emissions. We actually have this money in our system already. But what this is about is investing it the right way to reduce our long-term costs, right? And we can do that. We know we can motivate to do that.
Thank you, Ben. We have another question that's come in that's, I think, an interesting one. With the public power safety shutoffs and, windstorms that can knock down power poles and so forth, there's a lot of concern, particularly among people who have solar, that they would like to have battery storage and the ability to basically island from the grid so that they have power when these outages occur. Is this part of the push for green buildings, more storage and the ability to continue to use your own generated power when the grid goes down?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And for me, this kind of gets into a sort of bigger question around centralized versus decentralized systems and where do we invest. I think, on energy, I think it sort of depends on where you are and where your home is, right? So if you're in a more rural area that's subject to more blackouts, it probably makes sense for you to install energy storage so that you can keep on essential systems during a blackout. One of the things that we don't talk about enough is those that have conditions where they need access to refrigerated medicine or they need to be on breathing apparatus and stuff like that. That's a big deal. Some people really need power. We need to make sure those people have access to power. But as a society, where should we be investing that money? If everyone invests in a localized system, is that a smart investment versus doing a centralized system? I think it really depends on kind of where you are. And again, this comes back to who has the ability to pay, right? I think a lot of times people think about folks who are living in mountain areas and rural areas and just assume that they have money because they have bigger property. That's just not true. A lot of those people can't afford to install these kinds of things. And so, I think microgrids and islanding makes a lot of sense when there's a need in your local community. And I think there's things you can do to be prepared anyway, in terms of having emergency charging available. You can have a portable charger for your phone, for other devices on site. They have bigger batteries now. You can have a solar system that's just a panel attached to a battery that's in your yard that you can use to charge things if needed. So there's other options for some of that stuff. Hopefully that answers. Oh, the other part I was going to make about that is around water. I do see legislation coming around water in an increasing way where they're going to require on-site water reuse for commercial buildings. We are seeing more and more of that in residential buildings. In fact, Pasadena had a great laundry to lawn program that was free here locally. I think I looked at it and then it got overprescribed and I missed my window. But that's an important thing we need to be looking at more and more because the biggest uses of water are irrigation on site at all of our homes. If we can reuse our laundry water, our bath water, our sink water to irrigate, it cuts out a lot of that waste in our water system. And so I would encourage people to look at that as, again, as a decentralized, centralized argument.
Well, thank you, Ben. There are a number of questions that have come in about specific types of materials that will be used in green construction going forward or retrofitting, and also related to what you talked about, the embedded carbon emissions within construction products. So questions concerning things like should parking spaces not be paved with concrete, for instance, or what role vertical solar could play, or new laminated beams, for construction. Different ways to process wood and prepare wood for use in buildings. Can you address that a little in terms of those specific items and what may be coming down the pipe?
Yeah, and first of all, it's been one of the things I've been most excited to see in the green building movement in the last couple of years is the transparency around materials that we just didn't have before. If you look at a building, depending on the useful life of that building, roughly 70 to 80% of that carbon in that building is actually embodied carbon materials that went into the building that building. And we haven't even been looking at that for years in the way we needed to. And so now we're starting to get that clarity. There's some tools that have been developed to model that over the last couple of years that are being used more and more. There's more of a use of life cycle cost analysis in terms of when a building gets broken down, what then happens with those materials. I was actually part of a great group out of the Netherlands. They're doing a inventory of all the materials that are already in their buildings throughout the city. So if you think about it, those are actually resources that we already have, that we've mined, that are going to be here that we can use in the future. And so I think this is really important. I'm going to address some of the things you mentioned. So concrete for parking. I'm a huge believer in porous solutions for concrete. We need to get water back into our water table. We shift so much of our water out into our waste system and it goes out to the ocean. We need to have that water stored locally in our water table. So I'd love to see a movement around just more porous concrete everywhere. And there's smart ways to do that now that, again, we have better, more advanced materials. The question around sort of solar on sides of buildings, I feel like a lot of the technology is just getting there now, where especially for larger commercial buildings, you can have like solar installed into your windows that you can still see out of and still it's got great visibility, but you can generate energy off of that. The reality is if you look at office buildings, they don't have a lot of rooftop space. It's tough to generate enough solar on the rooftop of an office building, especially when there's equipment up there to offset its use. So I think a lot of those materials are getting there. We're seeing that stuff used more and more. To me, it's all a question about payback. I'm an econ major from undergrad. One of the things I think hurt the green movement the most in the early days is that we kept saying, oh, this is the right thing to do, instead of saying, actually, this is the economically smart thing to do. Here's how you reduce your long-term costs. Here's how you invest the right way. And I'm a big believer in finding the ROI argument for these things. And it is there. And honestly, that's the hard part of anything, right? Is getting to the right argument. But the ROI argument needs to be made more and more often for these things. And the reality is we don't account for the true cost, right? When we're looking at a green building, people are like, oh, it may cost me, 5 to 10% to add these green elements. It's like, okay, I understand that, but you're looking at this as a snapshot. Is that reducing your long-term energy needs? Is that improving your health? Are you actually going to have less number of sick days and be 5 to 10% more productive because you have more natural light and better ventilation? Well, that's actually worth more than what you're paying by far for these upgrades over time. But we don't use models that take that into account in how we evaluate our spaces, especially when you look at developers and commercial developers these days. They're looking at the rental rates for their properties. And oftentimes companies are looking at the rental rates. They're not looking at, well, what's the revenue I'm going to make out of the space for my employees being more productive or having less sick days. We need to shift the conversation a little bit.
Right. Good. Well, another question has come in, and we hear a lot about high-tech solutions, induction stovetops and solar panels and so forth, heat pumps. What about low-tech solutions? One of the things that my wife and I do, for instance, is use a clothesline instead of a dryer to dry a lot of our clothing and laundry. and you know, there are many other types of things that can be done too, I think, to some low-tech gray water systems, for instance. You know, they reduce the emissions from pumping all that water if you can reuse it. You know, the water pumping over the mountains here uses a lot of the power from the grid.
Yeah.
So what's the outlook for use of low-tech solutions when it comes to decarbonizing buildings, particularly existing buildings?
It's a great question, and I'm glad you mentioned, you know, the energy cost of moving water. People don't talk nearly enough about, and the reality is water costs so much less than its actual worth because we have so much subsidized projects that have gone into this over more than 100 years here in California. A lot of times we'll translate water savings, like we'll work on projects where someone might be saving millions of gallons of water in a larger commercial building, and they'll be like, it's only a few grand that we're going to save a year. It's not necessarily worth it. When we translate that into the amount of energy that's voided from moving that water, changes the conversation entirely. The largest energy saving event in California history was when we had the drought back in 2015, 2016, and we cut water use by 25%. We saved more energy that year than any year in record in California. So that's just an important note. I'm a huge believer in low-tech solutions. Someone mentioned here shading. Shading makes a huge impact. It's not a big deal to necessarily put shades up in your home and make sure you're shading parts of your home that are getting a lot of sun at different parts of the day. Smart use of tree canopy, having trees that are positioned that will shade your home at the right times of day to reduce your heat load, incredibly important. My wife also dries our clothes on outside, more of a preference probably than necessarily her being aware of the dryer cost, but that's a great thing to do. Even just buying like smart irrigation controllers here in Pasadena, it's 100% rebate essentially for getting weather informed controllers for your irrigation. I also just bought this sensor here in Pasadena, again, 100% rebate that monitors your water use in real time. And that's an example, like none of us really know. We get our water bill a month or 2 months after we use our water. Do we really know what goes into that? People tell you need to save water. It's like, well, okay, but I don't really know what I'm doing that's contributing to that. We need to have real-time information on a lot of this stuff. But low tech is always a better way to go because that's going to be also more sustainable. The less money you invest, the less money that goes into, think about how much it takes to build a solar panel or even to build a smart sensor. There's embodied carbon in that as well. So we need to look at those low tech solutions first. And again, that shading, cool roof, reflective coatings, those things all help quite a bit. Smart use of tree canopy, those things help as well. Using porous pavement in your yard is going to put more water into your local water table under your home, should reduce your irrigation costs long term. So all these things will add up.
Great. We have some questions coming in related to the politics surrounding green buildings, and including, what you expect may come out of COP26 and how that may, help going forward in greening buildings. And also in terms of cities, cities are where the rubber meets the road, particularly when it comes to construction, because you have to get permits from cities. So the other part of it is you've got the international picture and then the local picture of what role cities should be playing and what are the key things they can do to help reduce emissions.
That's a great question. Cities, I think, have almost all the control in a lot of ways. Because it comes down to local permitting, I think, a lot of times I tend to not pay as much attention to the big things that are happening globally or federally because, those things may generate money that can come and be invested. But at the end of the day, it's local groups and agencies that decide oftentimes how that money is spent. So I do think we need to focus on that. And so, one of the big issues that we're dealing with here in California, and I talked about this a little bit, is just, this move off of natural gas. We've had a big battle, and I think we will still, of labor being concerned that's going to lead to less jobs, of our environmental justice groups and others being concerned that it's going to lead to increased costs for folks who have less money, who are renting. And these are important issues we need to address. We need to make sure everyone knows that there is an opportunity to have a job that's going to be long term. Maybe we can use the opportunity to wean off of natural gas and pipe fitting to use more water reuse systems, install more water recycling, and those people can have jobs doing that. We just talked about all this incredible investment that's going to be needed in electrical infrastructure, from EVs to energy storage. we need a workforce to do that. The reality is we don't have that workforce now. And then when it comes to the cost issue, we should be subsidizing the cost for installation of all these things because it's going to lead to longer term, the costs are lower across the board. The question is really about these upfront costs. And one of the things we don't think about now is that we actually pay for gas infrastructure in a lot of our communities. Sometimes we look at that as a sunk cost, that was done 10, 20 years ago, maybe it was done through a bond or something like that. But that cost all had to be invested somewhere. I'm personally a believer that it takes a diversified portfolio of solutions to make progress. So I'm in favor of looking at hydrogen or looking at renewable natural gas and things that can make use of existing infrastructure. But at the same time, I think we need to hold ourselves accountable that the goal is to decarbonize, and we need to do that as quickly as possible. And that there's a role for hopefully everything at the table, but we need to reduce emissions and hold each other accountable to that. So on the political standpoint, I think cities have so much of the control. A lot happens on a federal level, on a global level, but that a lot of times I think is just noise until we can learn how that money is going to be spent locally and how we can change local regulation. I think you're on mute, Bill. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. That's a good answer, I think. Well, I wanted to cover a few more questions that have come in, although time is beginning to run short. I have one myself. I lived in a building in Washington, D.C. suburbs in Virginia that was all electric back in the early 1980s. It was heated with heat pumps, electric cooking, and so forth, electric dryer. So when we hear all of the controversy about cities that are, banning gas hookups for new construction, what's behind that in your mind? And should it be controversial at all, since we've had all electric homes, going back to the days of Ronald Reagan's GE Pavilion in Disneyland?
Yeah, and I think this is a great question, and I think the reality is we shouldn't be investing anymore in infrastructure around that's going to be emissions producing, right? We just looked at this graph of where we're headed from a climate change standpoint from a degree basis. We should not be investing in any more infrastructure that's around fossil fuels. We have existing infrastructure now that we should make sure we're taking advantage of because the reality is that costs a lot of money. But there shouldn't be any investment in new infrastructure, in my opinion, that's fossil fuel based, because the reality is we have so much work to do and we need to be spending that money on other solutions that can get us there faster. And so that's why you've seen a lot of that, those gas bans on, why install new gas equipment? Why pay for new gas equipment in a new development when the reality is we just saw on these regulations on the state level, sure, maybe it'll happen in 10 years for retrofits, but these numbers are going to be brought down. People are going to be required to retrofit these buildings anyway in 10 years. So why are we investing in gas infrastructure? We should be going all electric now. And if you're developing a building, that argument for you is that you're future-proofing yourself. You're reducing some of that longer-term cost. And so that just needs to be communicated the right way. But does that answer your question? I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that gets toward an answer. The other thing that I think people are interested in here is that essentially people want to know, I think, what the timeline is, really for achieving this movement toward green building and meeting the state goals. And is it realistic in your view?
I think, like we're already, to your point earlier, like all the regulations around new development and new buildings are kind of already there. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to get more aggressive. And reality is people have to build to code for the most part. I think the challenge is really in the existing buildings and the retrofit work. And that's going to be hard. It's going to require a lot of investment. I really think this decade is critical. And I think we're going to see a significant amount of investment over the next 5 to 10 years. Frankly, I don't know whether we'll be able to get there or not, but I think we need to try as hard as we can because we are seeing the impacts in an increasing way. And I think, kind of coming back to my point earlier, I think we have a tendency to sort of dehumanize this conversation a little bit. It's around data, it's around technology. The reality is we're talking about people here. We're talking about people having a better place to live. We're talking about people's health. And so we need to be looking at those investments more in that framework. And I do think it's possible. we're seeing it happen now. We're seeing things happen in some ways faster than we thought. If you look at, solar adoption, for instance, if you had told me, solar right now is the cheapest form of energy you can develop in the world. If you had told me 10 years ago that would be, that was going to happen by 2020, that solar would be the cheapest source of new energy, people would have not believed you. But the reality is that stuff can happen. We're seeing, same kind of advancement around energy storage. So I do think it's possible, but it's going to take a lot more coordination. And I think we need to stop. One of the things that's, I think, really tough sometimes is we get in these weeds over fighting over, I'll use the labor example we just talked about. People need good jobs. People need to have the right to have employment opportunities. We should already be flipping that conversation on, like, let's create these new opportunities for you. Let's create that pathway. Instead, we're fighting over the past. I don't see much in the history of our country or mankind where people have been trying to fight to keep an old status quo that's actually really lasted long term. All that does is really delay. And so we need to be leaning in to think about how do we do this in a way that engages everyone and is more progressive.
Well, thank you, Ben. I think we're at the point where we need to move ahead in the program here. And I want to thank you, and I think everyone wants to thank you so much for all the time you've spent and thought you've given. And we'd like to make sure that people can communicate with you, so the league will share your contact info. And if there is a place where your slides could be made available for reference, that would be wonderful for us. So I hope we can arrange that. So with that, Ben, thank you very much. We're going to hear now from
thank you.
Take care, Ben. From Kathy Berlin, who is going to talk about advocacy efforts right now from the Natural Resources Committee of the League. Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Ben, for that wonderful presentation. It was thorough and covered many different areas, not just building electrification. It was nice to hear it all coordinated and brought into the picture. Hello, I'm Kathy Berlin. I'm a member of the Natural Resources Committee of the Pasadena League, and I'm chair of the National League's Climate Action Team. The National League's team reviewed many climate action plans, excuse me, from various cities across the country, and we found them all lacking in effectiveness. So we changed our focus and focused on the most effective 10 actions. Veronica, I'm ready for my slide. Thank you. Nope, that's a processes. Back one to the actions, please. Thank you. We focused on the most effective 10 actions and 10 processes that cities can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The national team, with significant input from Cynthia Kennedy, our own, produced the framework, which includes taking action in the three areas that produce the bulk of greenhouse gas emissions. You can see that has to do with the production of energy and with buildings and with transportation. And therefore, if we can reduce those, we will reduce the bulk of our greenhouse gas emissions, which is what we need to do. You can see that numbers 3 through 6 have to do with buildings and using renewable energy only and retrofitting and taking the fossil fuel energy out of existing buildings, as Ben was speaking about. The 10 actions and the 10 processes, the chart and the report, which includes examples of cities that are implementing these actions, are available on our LWV-PA website on the Natural Resource Committee's page. If we could go to the processes just for a minute. Next slide, Veronica, please. Yes, the 10 processes we put together as the sort of the means to get to the goals as quickly as possible. And so the important words there are in italics, I think, and they have to do with accountability and transparency and workforce development and things that Ben actually referred to. Veronica, if you could back up one slide. Because it is the actions that really are the most important. However, we can help the cities to take these actions. So several of us in the Pasadena League's Natural Resources Committee formed a climate advocacy subcommittee. We've taken this framework of the 10 actions and 10 processes to the Pasadena city officials, starting with the mayor, who showed great interest and referred us to the Municipal Services Committee, who referred us to the city manager, who met with us with the director of the planning department, David Rios, and the chair of the Environmental Advocacy Commission, Jonathan Levy. We presented our 10 actions and 10 processes to all of those committees and all of those people. And we've been invited to participate in the current process to update Pasadena's climate action plan, which the planning department is responsible for and currently working on. At the same time, we hope to work with the city to implement useful actions as quickly as possible to reduce Pasadena's greenhouse gas emissions. One of the ways that we're working on this is that we've been following the city council, the city committees, the city commission's agendas, and contacting the Natural Resource Committee members and groups who share our climate concerns to speak out when climate issues such as purchasing fossil fuel, municipal vehicles, and fossil fuel buses are on the meeting agenda. We have been very successful in raising many public comments at these meetings. There have been so many public comments that the issues have not been voted on at those meetings, but have been basically remanded for further information before they come again onto the agenda, but we are watching this very carefully. The next issues that are expected to be on the Municipal Services Committee agenda at their next meeting on Tuesday, November 9th, are the banning of gas-powered leaf blowers and, sorry about that, the banning of gas-powered leaf blowers in Pasadena, and relating to Ben's wonderful presentation, the use of renewable energy only in new construction of multifamily developments, which is being, I think, has been worked on and is being presented by the planning department. The agendas for the city meetings are posted on the City of Pasadena website by 6 p.m. on Thursday night for the upcoming week. The website is cityofpasadena.net, and the link for the agendas is on the home page. Once we have the agenda, we send the notices with information about how and when to send written or spoken comments to the appropriate city committee or council, and they have been quite receptive. As I noted, they have actually not just voted without fuller information and without consideration of the public outcry. All of the public outcry has been in favor of climate-friendly actions, not fossil fuel vehicles, etc. So we need climate activists and all league members to help us monitor our other cities' weekly agendas. It's really easy. If you can help the league educate and advocate, which are our two main goals, please let us know. Please contact the Natural Resources Committee. The email for Natural Resources Committee is naturalresources@lwv-pa.org. The email is on the Natural Resources Committee webpage, which is on the Pasadena League's website. If you look on the left-hand side there under our work and committee webpage and go down to Natural Resources Committee, you will find that. You will also find this chart of the 10 actions and 10 processes, and you will find a link to the full report with all the examples of the cities that are implementing those actions as of now. So please join us in informing our city officials about the actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and please join us in monitoring our other cities to do the same. Thank you. Martha?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. Really appreciate all the insight you gave as to how to take action at the city level, because I think it really is going to take all of us. I also want to thank Bill for his work on doing the moderating of all the questions. And of course, especially Ben, thank you for making us aware of the wonderful work being done by the U.S. Green Building Council, LA. I mean, we all live here in Southern California, and every bit of action that takes place, because we breathe the same air, you know, we travel the same streets and things like that. And it's going to take all of us working together. It's really exciting to be able to focus on actions that we can take to maintain a sustainable environment for us being people, humans. environmental change is here, and we have to accept a new normal. We need to internalize climate action as part of our lives. We need to get to a place where we see climate action as an opportunity, especially for those of us who are engaged in social justice, because it's an opportunity to work with communities that have historically been left behind. There's job opportunities, a lot of opportunity. If we're changing our energy systems, we should leverage that to change our inequity systems and to try to leave these communities or bring these communities up along with everyone. We're all going through change. We may as well take that on together. Thank you again, Ben, for the invitation to work with you. That's an opening for our Natural Resources Committee, and they do take real pride in collaborating with as many groups as possible. As you hear, we're able to call on our partners to actually not just activate or take action, but to agitate for change. And so they're a really effective committee, and I'm really proud of the work they've done. I'm sure that they are going to be happy to engage with your group, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. And now I want to remind you all that Pasadena Media has recorded this session, and within a day or two, they're going to have this posted to our website. So you'll be able to go to our YouTube channel to view it, to share it with other people. And while you're there, please, again, take a look at the video clip that was done on the 10 actions and 10 processes. You will get to see our newest league members. They're all three of them are high school seniors at Pasadena High, and they've really taken an interest in this and have expressed what it means to them to really take this climate change seriously. So go to our website, take a look at what we have to offer, and please, stay in touch with us. Please, Veronica, bring up our final screen. Thank you very much. We do hope that you enjoyed this program. I want to take the time to actually thank again Bill Kelly, our moderator. He did an excellent job. Our question sorter behind the scenes, Maureen Johnston, and our Zoom hosts, Catherine Gasby and Veronica Jones. And of course, the events committee that puts everything together. And of course, finally to Ben Stapleton, thank you for joining us. And thank you to Pasadena Media again. Last but not least, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again at one of our public information events, and stay informed about the League's activities at our website. Kathy talked about going to our website and seeing about looking at the left navigation panel where you can find out about our committee work if you have an interest in other things in addition to climate. So please don't forget to have a very, very happy and healthy Thanksgiving. Thank you for sharing your day with us. This does conclude our program. As you can see, there's our website for you to go to, and the events committee email where you can submit your comments